I'm sorry, could you just run that by me one more time? I asked, placing my fork down on the plate with a slow, deliberate clink. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the dining room. My mom, bless her heart, just beamed at me with that saccharine, unnervingly sweet smile she gets when she thinks she's being incredibly clever. Oh, it's not complicated, honey, she chirped, like she was explaining a recipe. It's the perfect plan. You marry Kevin. Then, this house of yours, she gestured vaguely in the direction of my home, miles away, becomes his house too. Legally. It becomes a family asset, you see. And then, with your wonderful job, the two of you can finally tackle his student debt together. We'll be one big, happy, financially stable family. I looked from my mom's glistening eyes to my stepfather Rick's placid, nodding face, and then to my stepbrother, Kevin. He was sitting across from me, a smug little smirk playing on his lips as he shoveled a massive forkful of mashed potatoes into his mouth. He looked like a toad that had just been told he was secretly a prince. The three of them stared at me, their faces a mixture of cheerful expectation and a hint of impatience, as if my immediate, joyous agreement was a foregone conclusion. They were waiting for me to burst into tears of gratitude. Oh, I didn't cry. I started to laugh. A low, quiet chuckle at first, then it grew into a full-blown, wheezing laugh that made my eyes water. Because when the alternative is screaming until the windows shatter, sometimes all you can do is laugh at the sheer, unadulterated audacity of it all. They thought this was the breaking point. They had no idea it was actually the beginning of the end. And to understand how we got to that disastrous dinner, you have to go back about a year. Let's set the scene. I'm 28. I have a decent job as a financial analyst, something I worked my butt off for through college and a soul-crushing internship. My dad passed away from a heart attack when I was 19. It was sudden, and it completely wrecked me and my mom. We clung to each other for a few years, and I kind of put my own life on hold to make sure she was okay. When I finally saved up enough for a down payment on a small, two-bedroom bungalow in a quiet suburb, it felt like I could finally breathe. It was mine. My mortgage, my ridiculously high property taxes, my leaky faucet. My peace. About 5 years ago, my mom met Rick. And honestly, I was thrilled for her. He seemed nice enough. A little bland, maybe, like an unsalted cracker, but he made her happy. The only baggage he came with was his son, Kevin. When I first met Kevin, he was 25 and already had the defeated, resentful air of a man twice his age whose life hadn't gone according to his non-existent plan. He had a limp handshake and a tendency to look at you just a little too long, with a look that wasn't quite a smile. For the first few years, it was fine. We did the awkward holiday dinners. I'd ask Kevin what he was up to, and he'd launch into some vague, jargon-filled explanation of his latest venture, which sounded suspiciously like a pyramid scheme or a crypto scam. I'd nod, say wow, sounds interesting, and then spend the rest of the evening talking to my mom. He was a non-entity in my life. A weird, socially awkward footnote in my mom's new chapter. Then, about a year ago, Kevin's latest e-commerce dropshipping empire collapsed. Shocker. He lost all his money and apparently a significant chunk of Rick's retirement savings and had to move back in with Mom and Rick. This is when things started to go from occasionally awkward to consistently uncomfortable. The first real red flag, the inciting incident, if you will, was my car. My trusty 10-year-old sedan decided to die on the highway. The repair was going to take a week. I was stressing about getting to work when my mom called with a brilliant idea. "Kevin's not doing anything. He can drive you," she announced. I tried to refuse, saying I could take the train or Uber, but she insisted. "Don't be silly. What is family for? He'd be happy to help his new sister." It was a nightmare. He was always late. His car smelled like stale fast food in desperation. He'd play his terrible music at a deafening volume and try to make these weird, stilted conversations about my job. "So, you, play with money all day? You must be rolling in it." I'd just stare out the window and count the minutes. When I finally got my car back, I thought the ordeal was over. I was wrong. It was just the beginning. This was the start of the "what is family for" era. A phrase that, I soon learned, was code for "give Kevin whatever he wants." It started with small things. "Honey, Kevin needs to get to an interview across town. Can he borrow your car?" He brought it back with the gas tank on empty and a fresh collection of burger wrappers on the floor. When I mentioned it, my mom sighed dramatically. "Oh, sweetie, don't be so petty. He's under a lot of stress. You should be more supportive." Then came the money. It began with a text from Mom. "Kevin's a little short for his phone bill. Could you help him out? Just $50. He'll pay you back on Friday." He didn't. 2 weeks later, it was $100 for an application fee for a coding bootcamp. He never enrolled. Each time, I would hesitate, and each time, my mom would call me, her voice dripping with disappointment. "I just don't understand your attitude, Sarah. After your father died, we had to rely on the kindness of others. I thought I taught you the importance of helping family. Kevin is your brother now." That was her trump card. My dad's death. She knew it was the one thing that could make me fold. The guilt was a physical weight. So, I'd send the money, feeling sick to my stomach. The escalation went into overdrive when Kevin discovered where I lived. He showed up one Saturday morning, unannounced, while I was having coffee in my pajamas. "Hey, sis." Was in the neighborhood, thought I'd pop by. My neighborhood was a 45-minute drive from theirs. He wasn't in the neighborhood. He'd come looking for me. I was so flustered I let him in. He walked through my small house like he was inspecting it, making comments. "Wow, you've got a lot of space here. Big backyard. You should really have people over more. Like family." He stayed for 3 hours. He ate my food, used my laptop, and left a ring of sweat on my favorite armchair. Before he left, he gave me this weird, lingering hug and whispered, "We should do this more often." The hairs on my arms stood up. I locked the door, bolted it, and watched through the peephole until his car was out of sight. I called my mom, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and anxiety. "Mom, you have to tell Kevin he can't just show up at my house like that. It's not okay." Her response? A light, tinkling laugh. "Oh, honey, don't be so dramatic. He's just being friendly. He looks up to you. He sees you as a real sister. You're all he has." It was like talking to a brick wall. A brick wall that constantly gaslit me. According to her, his creepy staring wasn't creepy, it was admiring. His inappropriate questions about my dating life weren't invasive, they were protective. His utter lack of boundaries wasn't a problem, it was a sign of how comfortable he feels with you. The final straw before the disastrous dinner proposal was the spare room incident. My mom called me, her voice full of fake casualness. "So, Rick and I were thinking, things are a little cramped here with Kevin. And you have that lovely spare bedroom you never use." I cut her off. "No. You didn't even let me finish. The answer is no. Kevin is not moving into my house." The line went cold. "I see," she said, her voice dropping all pretense of warmth. "I see how it is. After everything I've done for you. I sacrificed so much to give you a good life after your father passed, and this is how you repay me? By hoarding your big house all to yourself while your poor brother is struggling? Some daughter you are." Then she hung up on me. I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. It was a blissful 2 weeks of silence. No guilt trips, no texts asking for money, no unannounced toad-like stepbrothers on my porch. I almost allowed myself to think that maybe, just maybe, I had finally established a boundary. Then came the invitation. "Dinner at our place on Saturday. We need to talk. As a family." My stomach twisted, but a part of me, the stupid, hopeful part that still wanted my mom's approval, thought this was an olive branch. A chance to clear the air. So, that brings us back to the dinner table. Me, laughing like a maniac while they stared at me, their perfect plan dissolving in the face of my hysterical refusal. When my laughter finally died down, I wiped a tear from my eye and looked my mother dead in the face. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You want me to enter into a legally binding contract with this person, I gestured at Kevin, who was now glaring at me, a man I barely know and actively dislike, so he can have access to my financial assets. You want me to take the house I worked and saved for years to buy and hand over a 50% stake to a 30-year-old man-child who can't hold down a job. And you want me to use my salary to pay off the debts he accumulated all by himself. All of this so you can feel like you have one big happy family? Is that the gist of it? My mom's face hardened. The sweet facade was gone, replaced by a cold fury. You're being selfish. Selfish. I repeated, the word tasting like poison. I am not being selfish. I am being sane. What you are suggesting is financial suicide. It's insane. You are all completely and utterly insane. I stood up, throwing my napkin on the table. Thank you for the enlightening dinner. I'm leaving now. Kevin shot up from his chair. You can't just walk out. You owe us. My mom took you in. I stared at him. Your mom took me in? She's my mother. She raised me. That's literally her job. You, on the other hand, are a stranger. And you are owed nothing. I walked out, ignoring my mom's shrieks of, Sarah, you come back here. Don't you walk away from your mother. The moment I got in my car and locked the doors, the adrenaline wore off and the shaking started. The text messages began before I even pulled out of their driveway. A flood of them. From Mom. You are a disgrace. Your father would be so ashamed of you. You've torn this family apart with your selfishness. Don't bother coming to Christmas this year. You're not welcome. From Kevin. You are a stuck-up B*******. You think you are better than us, asterisk. Good luck dying alone in that empty house of yours. I was trying to do you a favor. No other man would want you. I drove home, the hateful words on my phone screen blurring through my tears. But the tears weren't just sadness. They were tears of rage. A rage so pure and cold it felt like ice in my veins. The people-pleasing, guilt-ridden daughter was gone. She had died somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the front door. I didn't block their numbers. Not yet. I let the messages pour in. Every manipulative phrase from my mother, every misspelled insult from Kevin. I saved every single one. Screenshots. Voicemails. I was building a case, though I didn't know exactly for what yet. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Rick. For a fleeting moment, I thought he might be the voice of reason. The calm, unsalted cracker in this box of crazy. Sarah, he said, his voice heavy with false sincerity. I'm calling about your mother. She's a complete wreck. She hasn't stopped crying. The stress, it's not good for her heart, you know. I'm worried about her. Here it comes, I thought. Look, he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I know the marriage thing is a bit unconventional. But just think about it. It doesn't have to be a real marriage. Nobody has to know. You just sign the papers. It would make your mother so happy. It would give Kevin the fresh start he needs. Isn't your mother's happiness worth a small sacrifice? A small sacrifice. He called giving away my entire future a small sacrifice. That was it. The last thread of hope I had for any of them snapped. They were a team. A united front of delusion and entitlement. Rick, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. Thank you for clarifying your position. You've been very helpful. I hung up the phone. The next morning, I wasn't on the phone with my family. I was on the phone with a lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense woman whose online reviews were glowing. I explained the whole situation, from the slow boil of the past year to the explosive dinner and the subsequent harassment. I forwarded her the screenshots and the voicemails. She was silent for a long moment after I finished. Then she said, wow. Okay. Well, they've certainly made this easy for us. Here's what we're going to do. A week later, I sent a group text to my mom, Rick, and Kevin. I've had some time to think. You're right. We need to talk this out. Come to my house on Saturday at 2 p.m. We'll settle this once and for all. My mom's reply was instantaneous. I knew you'd see reason. We'll be there. They arrived at 2 p.m. on the dot, marching up my walkway like a conquering army. Kevin had that smug smirk back on his face. My mom looked triumphant. Rick just looked bland. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Their triumphant expressions faltered as soon as they saw the woman sitting on my sofa, a leather briefcase open on the coffee table in front of her. "Who's this?" my mom demanded. "Mom, Rick, Kevin," I said, closing the door behind them. "This is my lawyer, Ms. Albright." The color drained from my mother's face. Kevin's smirk vanished. "Please have a seat," Ms. Albright said, gesturing to the armchairs opposite her. They sat down stiffly, looking like they were at a parole hearing. "Let's get straight to the point," Ms. Albright began, her voice crisp and professional. "My client, Sarah, has informed me of a rather unusual proposal that was made to her last week. A proposal involving marriage for the purpose of transferring assets and assuming debt." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "She has also shared with me the dozens of messages you have sent her since she declined this proposal. Messages which, in the eyes of the law, constitute harassment." She then picked up her phone and played one of my mother's voicemails, the one where she was sobbing about how I was a heartless monster who was killing her. The sound of her own manipulative voice filling my living room made my mom shrink in her seat. "Now," Ms. Albright continued, "we can go down the route of a restraining order. It's a simple process, and given the evidence, it will be granted without issue. Any violation would result in immediate arrest." "You're taking out a restraining order on your own mother?" my mom whispered, her voice trembling with theatrical disbelief. "I'm willing to forego that on one condition," I said, speaking for the first time. "That you leave me alone. Completely. You lose my number, you forget my address. We are done." "But we're family," my mom cried. "No, we're not. Not anymore," I said. "But that's not all we're here to discuss." Ms. Albright slid 3 folders across the coffee table. In the course of preparing for this meeting, I did a little due diligence. "Kevin, we'll start with you." Kevin looked up, startled. "A simple background check reveals 2 outstanding warrants for petty fraud in the next state over, related to a cryptocurrency consulting business. It also appears you've been using your mother's credit cards without her permission for your online gambling habit. I've taken the liberty of informing the credit card companies, who seemed very interested to learn about the fraudulent charges." Kevin looked like he was going to be sick. Rick was staring at him in horror. "Now, for you, Mom," I said, my voice hardening. Ms. Albright also looked into some of our family finances. And she found something interesting. "Do you remember when Dad died, and we had to sort out his estate? You had me sign a bunch of papers. You told me it was just procedure." My mom was staring at me, her eyes wide with panic. She knew what was coming. "You didn't just have me sign papers, Mom. You had me sign a quitclaim deed. You made me a 50% co-owner of your house. The house I grew up in. The house you and Rick have been living in for the past 5 years." Ms. Albright took over. "As a 50% owner of the property, my client is entitled to 50% of its fair market rental value for the duration of your occupancy. Or, alternatively, she can force a sale of the property and claim her half of the equity. We've had the house appraised. Your 50% share, Sarah, comes out to approximately $210,000. She slid one final piece of paper across the table. It was a formal offer. They could either buy me out for the full amount within 90 days, or the house would be listed for sale. There was a dead silence. It was beautiful. The looks on their faces, the sheer, panicked disbelief. It was better than I ever could have imagined. My mom's jaw was literally hanging open. Rick looked like he'd been tasered. My mom finally found her voice. It was a choked, strangled sound. You wouldn't kick your own mother out of her home." I looked at her, at the woman who had tried to sell my future to save her deadbeat stepson, the woman who had used my dead father as a tool for manipulation. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No pity. Nothing but a vast, empty sense of release. "You should have thought of that," I said calmly, "before you tried to sell me into indentured servitude. The offer is on the table. You have 90 days. Now, please get out of my house." The aftermath was exactly as satisfying as you'd imagine. They couldn't afford to buy me out, of course. The house was sold. I got my check for $210,000, which I put straight into a high-yield investment account. My mom, Rick, and Kevin ended up in a cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The last I heard, Kevin was facing charges for the fraud, and Rick had to go back to work as a part-time greeter at a hardware store to make ends meet. I changed my number. I blocked them on all social media. I took a portion of the money and went on the first real vacation of my adult life. I sat on a beach, drank something fruity out of a coconut, and for the first time since my dad died, I felt completely and utterly free. My life is quiet now. It's peaceful. It's mine. So yeah, that's the story of how I had to legally and financially divorce my own mother to stop her from marrying me off to my creepy, broke stepbrother. It was a mess, but honestly, totally worth it. If you think that was wild, you should definitely subscribe and stick around. Because you will not believe what happened when my estranged aunt tried to sue me for a cut of the house money at Thanksgiving.